Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Shannon Scott, and I am our head of product at Airwallex. I've been with Airwallex for about 5 years, and actually, I don't have a finance background. I have an engineering background. Typically, I'm spending a lot of time in the basement, sort of working with the engineering teams, so it's quite novel for me to be up here and talking to you today about what Airwallex is doing. Reimagining a new era of banking for business. I think really what I want to do today is firstly give you a bit of a sense of who Airwallex is, our origins and our growth and where we are today. I want to talk a bit about Airwallex's infrastructure. This is our sort of collection, funds management and payout rails which we offer around the world. And talk about what we're now building on top of that infrastructure. So for example, Airwallex Yield is a product that allows businesses to return a return in AUD or USD on their cash holdings. But this is really just the beginning. And so when I talk about reimagining a new era of banking for business, it's actually around what interesting services can we build on top of that infrastructure to leverage and understand what businesses are really trying to achieve, their business processes, and how can that financial infrastructure become really a sort of silent partner under the hood in supporting those ultimate business processes. So firstly, onto Airwallex. So Airwallex was actually founded in 2015 by 4 University of Melbourne alumni here in Australia. But that group always had a bit of an entrepreneurial bent. Actually, this is our co-founder, Max Lee, who's our head of design. He and Jack Zhang, the CEO, actually owned a coffee shop in Melbourne. And as you can imagine, I think with the coffee culture here in Australia, it's actually pretty hard to make that business run competitively and optimize your costs and cash flow. And one thing they tried to do was actually purchase a lot of their materials from overseas. So just trying to purchase coffee cups internationally, for example, should have been a very easy process and low cost, but in fact, the payment avenues available to them made it prohibitive. The fees for the transactions, the FX margins, the offline processes, and the time taken meant they simply couldn't do it. And given that Jack had a FX background from working with a major bank here in Australia, this is where he saw the opportunity for Airwallex. Now, that transfers product, being able to actually make it easy to purchase materials overseas and embed the FX component, was one of Airwallex's first products. But today, we now have a 5.6 billion USD valuation, and we are processing over $100 billion in annualized volume. This is a 68% year-on-year increase. So even in our 9th year, we're seeing really significant growth in our volumes. And this corresponds to an annualized revenue of around 500 million US dollars. So pretty significant growth, and it's something that we don't see slowing down in the near future. I think a lot of that growth can really be a testament to Jack, our CEO, always thinking about what's next and that ambition to keep actually growing and driving the business. So what is the infrastructure that made Airwallex so successful? It's really the global infrastructure that allows companies to collect, manage and pay out their funds around the world and do it very easily, as if it was as easy as a domestic transaction. So if we take that transfer experience on the far right-hand side, we can actually pay out to over 60 currencies around the world to 150 countries. And 90% of those transactions are on local rails, so not using the incumbent SWIFT network. In fact, by the end of the year, 75% of our international transaction flow will actually be instant transactions on those local rails. So if you think back to 2015 when Airwallex was trying, well, Tuck & Co, the coffee shop, was trying to bootstrap their ability to make payments to buy supplies, we've come a long way from there, that 75% of those transactions can now actually be instant. In 2020, we launched card issuing in a partnership with Visa, and these are multi-currency cards, enabling you to purchase in a variety of transactions and actually maintain that transaction debiting from your multi-currency wallet. And we also launched payment acceptance. So this is the online checkout flow that you will very commonly use to purchase goods online. You may use Visa or MasterCard to pay for those transactions, but around the world it looks very different, and we actually support 160 different local payment methods through those collections rails. So our infrastructure, we have over 50 different banking partners around the world. We have licenses in 14 different operating regions. And so we'll continue to scale this infrastructure as broadly as we can to make it easy for businesses to operate globally as if they were a local. There are two key customer groups that we actually support. So the business account customers on the left, this is our direct B2B offering. And you could be any business. You've got your financial needs to manage. You've got to pay your suppliers. You have to receive funds from your customers. If you are a retailer like Australian company Orbit Key, for example, they need to pay internationally. They want to sell their goods all around the world, and they're using Airwallex for all of their sort of everyday international financial services. I think more sophisticated customers like our platform customers, these are using our financial services under the hood via our APIs or components, for example. And these are sophisticated customers who actually embed our solutions into their own product or offering. It might be a product that maybe is global payroll, for example, and there's sort of a financial transactions under the hood, or it might be a much more obvious sort of financial solution. For example, Stake is a platform customer of Airwallex. They enable their customers to purchase international equities around the world for investment purposes. We help Stake actually collect the funds, move them into the US to enable the purchase of those US equities. And Qantas Business Money is supported by Airwallex's Rails under the hood. All in all, we have about 100,000 customers using Airwallex across these two different customer groups. So this infrastructure really laid the foundation for what types of services can we build on top of this infrastructure to continue to make it more easy for businesses to operate internationally. Over the last 3 years, we've seen interest rates rise. We've seen a sort of tightening in the market and cash flow being more important and making sure you're actually making the most of the funds you have available. And so recently, as early as September last year, we introduced Airwallex Yield. And it was released last year to wholesale customers, but just last month to retail businesses. Airwallex was the first financial services provider that received an AFSL here in Australia for providing investment products to retail customers. So the premise of Airwallex Yield is a convenient way to put your money to work for you. Those idle funds generating returns both in USD and AUD. And really it was designed to, we're not trying to be a sort of sophisticated investor product. We're really trying to make it easy for businesses to have their money work for them. So the goal was competitive returns, and these rates are around 3 times those of the major Australian banks. Low risk, so this is a money market fund supported by JP Morgan Chase. So inherently a very low risk fund and very similar to what you would expect from a bank providing interest rates on their cash holdings. It's flexible. There's no lockup periods. You can move the money in and out as you need it. And so when businesses have those cash flow challenges, they don't need to worry about putting that money away for a long period. They can access it whenever they need to. And it's globally scalable. So we've launched it here in Australia for AUD and USD, but given that we operate in so many regions around the world, our goal is to offer this to customers in all of our operating regions. And as we support additional countries like Singapore, for example, and provide yield services on Singapore dollars, we'll make those returns on Singapore dollars available to Australian customers holding that currency as well. So we expect this to sort of scale across our many regions and add currencies over time. Again, this is a low sophistication product. We're not trying to be, I think, as sophisticated as many of the companies who are on the floor today, but this is a natural way for our customers to actually leverage the funds they're already holding. And of course, as the product manager, I'm very eager to make this sort of a seamless experience with with our full product suite. So how's it going? I think just like launching to retail customers in the last month, we've already seen $100 million US in funds under management. Some of the best customer feedback we're hearing is really that flexibility. So for example, Chris Gillies, CEO and co-founder of Leonardo AI, they're a customer of Airwallex, and one thing they really valued was the ability to access that funds when you need it. So not having to worry about cash flow, predicting your cash flow and what funds are going to be available in the future, but being able to put those funds aside, have them generate a return, and actually be able to access it when you need it. The new customer growth has predominantly come from customers outside of Airwallex. So we saw 33% of the funds being held in Airwallex got transferred from their wallet balances into yield, but double that actually came externally, and that drove actually like 200 new customers just in the first week of launching the product, which was really exciting. And looking forward, we'll continue to add this to more operating regions and more currencies around the world. So I think yield was a natural solution that we could offer on top of our infrastructure, but the broader question is, how can we leverage this infrastructure to continue to support businesses around the world? And very often the infrastructure is just a means to another goal. If I have vendors that I want to manage, I'm not really interested in actually the payment process. I've already set up the relationship. I know what I'm being supplied. The question is, how does that all happen under the hood and make it as seamless as possible? Or how can I help those vendors actually like create a better relationship with me without even thinking about the financial elements? And so being able to leverage this infrastructure, our banking partners around the world, we're sort of asking, what does this opportunity look like as we go forward? And the answer is in software. So actually software that focuses on those business processes, not necessarily the financial solution itself. So we've got across the I can see it on the screen here. So on the left-hand side, the ability to make it easy to collect funds. The obvious thing to do is, hey, here's my account number, and you can tell your customer to pay you into those numbers. But actually, if we move up the sort of functional stack, really you're generating an invoice. You're sending that out to the customer. If you had to do this offline, and that invoice had sort of an account number on it, then they need to go to their bank and they need to enter those details. And then when you receive the funds, there's a reconciliation process where you're not actually sure where those funds came from, and you have to figure out from which invoice. Maybe there's a number on the transaction. Maybe they entered it incorrectly. Maybe they didn't enter it at all. So if Airwallex can provide an invoicing solution that includes a link in the invoice to a checkout experience online, and then the customer makes the purchase using that link, as soon as the funds are received, it's reconciled directly back to the invoice itself. And so you've got full lineage of the invoice being generated all the way through to the payment and the reconciliation. Subscription management. If you're a merchant or a SaaS company, for example, that's charging your customers on a recurring basis, maybe $50 a month, for example, having the tools to be able to initiate those transactions on the right scheduling, with the right sort of user tiers or however model you choose to actually offer your product, we can offer those subscription services on top of the infrastructure. So you can schedule it through Airwallex, and then the collection actually just happens under the hood. And then payment links and plugins. If you've got a website, if you're using Shopify, Magento or others, then we already have the plugins available for you to be able to seamlessly embed Airwallex into those services. On the holding side, on the treasury, we already talked about yield. I think there's the opposite side of that equation is lending. So when there's a cash flow need, we actually already understand a lot about our customers. We understand the funds they're receiving. And so lending services, Airwallex has recently launched credit cards in Hong Kong. They'll be available shortly in Australia, and continuing to make it easy for customers to understand their cash flow, including using some more modern AI technologies to sort of help customers understand what is their cash flow position, how can they forecast what's happening in the future, and when you might use either of these tools from yield to lending. And then on the accounts payable side, on spend, so these are services we all have already. So card expenses, being able to issue your employees Visa cards with the appropriate limits and use cases in place. Perhaps they're coming to a conference in Sydney and they need to book the hotel and pay for a meal, for example. We already have the mobile app and the services for that employee to take a photo of their receipt as soon as the transaction's happened, go through the approval process, get sign-off by their manager, for example, and then it's all a clear lineage around how that expense actually happened on the card. If the employee doesn't have a card, that's okay. They can upload their receipt and get reimbursed through the transfer infrastructure that we already have available. And if you have suppliers who are issuing you invoices, you want to be able to onboard that supplier. You want to be able to onboard the bill and go through the appropriate approval process before you actually make the payment on our rails. That's all there for you as well. Now, this sounds really sensible, I think, when I talk it through this way, but it's not really reflective of how most businesses are operating today. So typically there'll be several systems involved. If we just look on that right hand, well, on the payout side, on the accounts payable side. So this is what it often looks like for a business today. They will have a separate vendor management system that will be completely disconnected from their financial systems. So the vendor management system, it will do the vendor onboarding, it will handle the bill upload, it will go through the approval process, and as soon as you're ready to pay, then you'll export out to your various financial providers. Now, if you have multiple payments to make in different countries around the world, so maybe some customers be paid in AUD, you're probably doing an ABA file export from the vendor management system and then uploading into your bank here in Australia. Then you might have a different file format for your financial partner in the US, for example, or your customers in a different region. In some cases, some customers will actually have another product in between the vendor management system and the financial systems, just to help translate the export file functionality back into the file format required by the financial solutions. So there's another vendor in the middle here who isn't even shown. And then from each of those different banking services, you need to integrate those with your accounting systems so that you can then reconcile your accounting transactions. But it's very unlikely that any information is ever going to get back to the vendor management system as to whether that bill's actually ever been paid. So that lineage is lost. What else is wrong with this system? Let me just catch up with my notes here. Well, firstly, your IT team needs to handle, potentially half a dozen systems or more, which is a nightmare for them. But whenever you have these offline processes, when you export the CSV file or whatever that may be and upload it into something else, there's so much opportunity for error and in some cases fraud. So you may have a sinister party within your finance team changing account numbers, for example. You may simply see errors where some of these files are lost, or you may find it very hard to actually reconcile what's happening between systems because all of the manual handling. And this is a really big issue with the various fraud scenarios that are taking place today. And the accountability chain is broken. So again, you're never really going to know from the VMS what's actually being paid. So let's have a look at how this looks in Airwallex. Firstly, we only now have two systems. We have Airwallex handling all of the vendor management, all of the bill management, all of the approval flows handled in Airwallex, and that then goes straight into our financial infrastructure, which is in this case, the payout rails. And then we already have a integration with the accounting system. It might be Xero or NetSuite, for example, and that's actually a two-way synchronization. So there's nothing manual about this, but actually as soon as a bill is sort of marked ready for payment and then paid, that will be synced into your accounting system as well. Even if there are changes made to a bill on the accounting system, it will go back into Airwallex. So in this case, we understand the full lineage from when the vendor was uploaded all the way through to when the payment was made and the synchronization with the accounting system. And without having any of those manual files, there's no room for that fraud or error to actually take place. So what else is cool about what's happening here? Well, we're using AI to actually help structure the bill. So if you receive an invoice over email and upload it into Airwallex, we'll pull out all the fields for you and structure them in a way that that can be approved and sort of mapped into Airwallex's transfer rails. We have an approval process for managing the vendor, so confirming that the vendor is approved. For uploading the bills, making sure that this bill is ready to be paid, it's for the right amount, it's for the right quantities, for example. And then within the finance team, we have an approval process for the finance team as well. Maybe one person enters the account information, the payment amount, and then somebody else signs off on the final transfer before it happens. If you are using different currencies to pay vendors, if you're using different payout rails, you can batch all of this up into the same batch payment because Airwallex can support all of those currencies, all of those rails you need. And if you're a multi-entity company, for example, Airwallex ourselves, we have entities all around the world, here in Australia, in Singapore, in the US. You can manage all of that vendor administration, all of that bill administration in the one place, and then we can batch up those payments to go from the appropriate entity. So payouts happening from Australia to your Australian suppliers, from the US to your US suppliers, for example. If you do want to batch all of this up and you want to pay at the end of the month, there's going to be FX involved. You may want to convert currencies in order to pay your suppliers. Then we can actually lock the FX rate for you. So in the middle of the month, you choose, yes, this is what I want to pay. I'd like to pay in these currencies. We'll provide an FX rate for the scheduled time at the end of the month. And then you have certainty in what's actually being paid. Now, This FX locking is actually a pretty sophisticated financial feature, but we're not trying to come up with a really comprehensive sort of FX forwarding and locking scenarios. Actually, we just want to make it really easy for this flow to be as seamless as possible. So where we need sophistication, we will create it in our product, but we want to make sure that the customer just does it in a way that they don't have to worry. They don't have to think about these things. They just want to know, this is what I'm paying. I'll go through the approval flows. It'll all get batched up and paid at the end of the month, and I have certainty in my cash flows. And lastly, you have that lineage. So once the bill has been paid, once it's been synced to the accounting system, if you ever need to go back, it's all in the same place. You can see when the transfer happened, and you can follow it back to the bill, follow it back to the vendor, because everything is all in the one place. So I think when you start to look at the combination of the business process software, such as the vendor management solution, actually tying directly into the financial infrastructure, you end up getting these really seamless business process flows that I think are really powerful for businesses today, and just don't require them to have to spend so much manual handling and so much offline checks to make sure everything is balancing. And I think the value here is pretty hard to understate. Great. So that's what I wanted to share today. Just a little bit about Airwallex and our growth. So having processed now 100 billion in volume annually, we're a global unicorn that's here to stay, and you can expect us to keep growing over the coming years, which is really exciting. We have infrastructure spanning 150 different countries, 160 different local payment methods, and we'll keep trying to build out this infra to make it easier and easier for businesses to operate globally. We're going to keep introducing innovative products like Yield, and then moving up the stack of business process software so that our customers don't even need to think about the financial infrastructure, but just how do they go about scaling their business. So thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. Or I can just let you get a coffee early. I'll come to you. Actually, you missed the mic, so I'll start with you and then we'll come to you. Sorry.
Sorry, apologies. What do you think the biggest challenges are that you're going to be facing over the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
For Airwallex?
Or Airwallex, sorry.
Yeah, I think actually we want to make sure that all of our services are scalable to different regions around the world. And so we need to make sure, like we have all the licenses, we understand the regulatory requirements, but they're all quite nuanced in each region. So I think for us, it's just about velocity and how can I get these services into the hands of customers as quickly as possible. And I don't want to feel like a sort of like all-in-one, fax machine copier. I want this to feel like a local service to customers here in Australia or Singapore or wherever you are, and that means it has the necessary sort of specifics of those regional requirements. So for me, it's about building an engineering team and a product team that is actually operating at high velocity, really understands their customers around the world, and then I think it's just a matter of keep going. Thanks. You can use mine.
Great. Last year when I was looking, when I was looking at the Airwallex last year, I had the indication that it was only for ABNs, and you were mentioning today it's retail. Did I understand correctly? As in, you don't need an ABN?
For the Yield product?
No, just for Airwallex, product in general.
It's still a B2B product, yes. So you do require an ABN. We don't currently have a consumer offering, but on the platform side, we do have consumer services such as Stake that uses our infrastructure, but Airwallex doesn't have a direct consumer product today. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, everyone. I hope that was a helpful overview of Airwallex. Cheers.